We're talking about eating in the sense of eating times, and the the cultures that we live in. If we go along with the culture, it will set a standard that we've been told about for for many years. But they have been there has been times when that has tried to have been changed. But basically, there's one culture that I know of that standardly eats 4 meals a day, but
Oh,
most actually eats 3 meals a day.
yep.
The 4 meal a day group are ones who get up early in the morning and have a meal, and then they have the other three at a normal time. Also, some cultures they eat late into the night. This is especially true in India, and in the Muslim world they eat all night and then fast all day during Ramadan.
Mm.
Um, so basically, what we're getting around to talking about is that the, in the really primitive times, uh, eating on a particular schedule was not something that humans did, but that we have, because of our society and expectations, we have fallen into certain patterns
Mm-hmm.
or habits. And so we eat because it's time to eat, and that in fact that has a whole lot to do then with the major change that was actually made when clockworks started, so that we could tell what time it was, and then they even have things like dinner time
Mm-hmm.
or lunchtime or 12 o'clock noon is the time to stop and eat. And so it became mechanized. And so the body has kind of gotten in a response to that. But a normal way of living is to eat when you're hungry.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And so we have actually programmed our hunger around the time to eat so that people will schedule. In fact, that's exactly what you were doing. You were saying you had a big lunch, so you intentionally skipped supper
Yeah.
or dinner, okay, with the understanding that you told yourself that you wouldn't be hungry,
Yeah.
all right, which is the expectation that you wouldn't be hungry because you had a big lunch. But but the size of the lunch doesn't have anything much to do with the decision you made that you wouldn't be hungry at normal dinner time and therefore would intentionally skip.
What do you mean by that?
I mean that we actually get hungry on schedule because we tell ourselves that it's time to be hungry.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
But that hunger has a different mechanism to it when it's more natural. Basically, what I'm saying is that we teach ourselves, we talk ourselves into being hungry.
Yes.
That's
That
cultural
is
too.
true.
That's Pala
Yep.
Sila Bhatta Paramasa. Even the time that we choose to be hungry is on a schedule that we have programmed since childhood. Isn't that amazing?
Yep.
It's amazing to figure that out. Why? Because now what we understand is we have a whole lot more control over our hunger, but we need to start paying attention to it directly rather than looking at the clock to see if I'm hungry.
So just eat when you're hungry.
This is in fact an old Zen koan that the old Zen master, he sleeps when he's sleepy and he eats when he's hungry. And that's sort of a dig at the Theravada, but the Theravada are exactly the same way, so it's really not a dig at the Theravada at all. And in fact, sleeping irregularly or at a different time,
Sleeping as well.
right, and eating as well. And so basically the way that the monks eat, actually they learn to control mentally their hunger just like you did, except that the body chemistry and the body physiology gets used to a different pattern or a different rhythm, and that rhythm can be controlled, and so that's one of the things that it comes along with the monk's tradition that is based upon the Pali word Vekalabhojana. And it's now one of the precepts in the higher precepts. It's one of the 8 for the 8 preceptors is Vekalabhojana, Vairamani, Sikhabadam, Samadhyami. And it has to do with eating food at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, eating food at the right time, when we actually look at the description of it in the Vinaya, we come to understand it's not so much of the right time to eat the food, but that it has to do with the right time of gathering the food, because gathering food and eating the food are only usually associated.
Mm-hmm.
That it's not necessary to eat food right after it's been gathered, but that would be the habit of people, that they would tell themselves, I'm going to be hungry now.
Mm-hmm.
And so now and so this is the way that hunger begins to operate, except that even within that tradition, that it's, here's the way that it was. It has more to do with when the food is actually gathered. This is the process of the Vekalabhojana, and as we said, the connection between gathering food and eating food are loosely connected. But in the Vinaya, the story is that there was a celebration like a fair, like a state fair or a county fair, and that this group of monks went into that environment on alms round, and they got loaded down with stuff, and they
Mm-hmm.
took it back to the group to share it with the others, and they were criticized. Because
Criticized.
they were criticized because they went to gather the food at the wrong place at the wrong time. The people who were there were not just and see, the reason why the monks would go in the morning was because they would take up the scraps and the stuff that was left from the evening meal of the lay people. At one time, I thought that the
Uh-huh.
monks went out in the morning because the Asian mind in India at that time is that people got up and ate really early in the morning, so the monks went at that time. No, the reality is that the monks go in the morning and gather the leftovers from the evening meal of the lay people. So they were eating the
Uh-huh.
leftovers, and they would go. But there was something else that happened which was very interesting, and that was when I was in very eastern Cambodia
Right.
as a monk, along with a bunch of other Cambodians. We went there as a group from the United States. So this is a Cambodian community that are bringing monks. Actually, there was the problem was starvation. They were
Right.
having a drought, and this one Wat in the United States sort of uh, uh, adopted this area, and so we got a whole boatload of rice, literally a boatload, up in northern and brought it down the river and trucked it into this area and gave that rice out. So this was the
Nice.
adventure that I was on. I've got a few photographs of that time. But um, the point is that at that place, the bendabat for the monks is not at the time that it is for the monks in Thailand who go out in the early morning.
Oh.
That and the reason I did that is because I went out early in the morning into an area where there weren't no lights and wound up everybody was just gaga that this monk was out so early gathering alms and he's all by himself, barefoot on and all of that kind of stuff. And that's when it was all explained to me that no, in this area of Cambodia, the monks go out at 11 in the morning. They go out at a
Right.
different time of the day. That basically the timing has to do with the following points. And that is that the monks don't go out in the afternoon in the heat of the day because that's the time when people are taking naps.
Right.
They also don't want to go out in the time of the day when commerce is really heavy, which is in the evening time. So about 4 in the afternoon, things got really busy. People were shopping and everything like that. Then they would go home and cook at night. So the monks used to go out at night, but the Buddha says, no, it's too dangerous. You can fall into a cesspit. You can fall into a thorn bush. You can get attacked by wild animals. You can get robbed. You can wander into the red light district. There's all kinds of reasons, and they're listed in the sutras as to the reason for not doing this, going out at night. And so the tradition just wound up being in most places that, okay, they'll go in the morning and collect the leftovers. Okay, so this is the typical way that the monks would eat, but when they brought the food back, there's actually a sutta and a long story about one of the monks did not like the fact that he had to wait until the morning knowing that he would get the leftovers when all the good stuff was out when people were at night. You want to go knock on their door while they're eating so that they can scoop something out really easy for you, and you get some of the best stuff. So he didn't like that a bit, and the story goes is that he wouldn't talk to the Buddha about it, and they stayed separated for a long time. But then, when at the particular timing, the monks who are around him says, "No, you've got to go to discuss this issue with the Buddha. If you don't like it, you've got to, get this off your chest." And so what the Buddha said is that, this whole issue is not about when you eat, but it's when you get the food and react and respond to the lay people. But once you go out and eat, you can keep the food for later and eat when you want to. When you feel hungry is when you can eat. But there's one more caveat that goes with that, and that is that it's not a good idea for monks to keep food overnight. And there is a rule for that. We don't want to keep the food overnight. Why? Because we'll get night visitors who know the food with their nostrils, and so they'll come into the kuti. So if the monk is getting ready to go to sleep and he's still got food that he hadn't eaten, it's better to throw it out to the animals rather than having the animals come in.
Yep.
Okay, so that's the rule, and that's the reason for the rule is because you don't want to keep the food there overnight.
Yep.
But other than that, when you eat is up to you, but that there is a communal meal. And the communal meal is when the monks generally do it together. Like I watched someone milk, there's a communal meal at 8 in the morning every morning. But there's also lay people who come to that. It's actually quite a big gathering. It's almost like a Buddhist church service every morning about the eating time of the monks. It's also a good time if you want to meet a particular monk is to go there for breakfast because most of them go. But not all of them do. That in fact, one of the teachers that I had, Achan Lee, who spoke good English, and Achan Po set me up with this guy
Mm-hmm.
because I would have never been able to get in touch with him on his own, because while the other monks were out at Bendabat, this monk would go to the kitchen and get his food there and then take it back to his kuti, and he was always a real recluse, a real hermit.
Mm-hmm.
And one day Achan Po mentioned him, and then another day he says, "You go follow him." And so I
Mm-hmm.
followed him up into an area that I had never seen of that in that Wat before, and there was a creek that we had to cross.
Right.
And that all, and if you you go by the path on this side, and then the path just goes by this creek here, and then it goes on up the path, and you look across this creek, and there's no place to get on the to climb on shore. It's like, bushy and all of that.
Uh-huh.
But in fact, it's a ford that was made intentionally, and if you walk to this other side, you can see a pathway coming back up, but you can't see the path from the other side of the creek.
Uh-huh.
You can only see the path once you get to that part in the creek to see where to come out. That's sneaking.
Yep.
They did that intentionally to keep visitors from that part of the Wat, to leave the monks alone. Okay, so I learned, and there was quite a number of kutis up there, about 15 or 20 of them,
Mm-hmm.
and that this was where Achan Lee stayed. And when I followed him, what he did was he set the food down. He didn't go to get food to eat. He went to get food for later in the day, and he just set that
Mm-hmm.
bowl down and went into with the lid on it, and went into the kuti. So this is kind of, over time I picked up this way of doing things, or this understanding that it really does have to do a lot with eating when you're hungry, rather than because of the time of it. Because most Westerners, when they hear all the monks, they eat once a way. Well, yeah, but that's the communal meal. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
monks then say, well, I can do that. And so it's on their own when they there was a time when I was a new monk that Achan Po would intentionally show up with apples or with bananas or something about noontime.
All right.
So he wanted to make sure that I had enough food. And I
That's
know where
nice.
he got that. I mean, he was a really royal teacher. He was
Mm.
number one high quality looking after a Western monk. So the point is that we learn to control the hunger so that the hunger is no longer an issue. We It's almost like that when a child, in childhood, when a child comes to mom and says, "Mom, I'm hungry," it's almost like an emergency
Mm. Yep.
for the mom, that she's got to do something. But no, you really don't have to. It depends upon the cultural situation that you're in, and that um, one of the things that we could do with our children, instead of jumping into emergency mode when they say they're hungry, is to ask them about it, to start a
Awesome.
conversation, to dialogue with them. Well, where do you feel hungry? What is it? How do you
Right.
know that this feeling, this sensation in the body? How do you know that that's hungry?
Yep.
Okay. Is it in fact that you're thinking about food, and because you're thinking about food, you want the food, and so you naturally become hungry right then? Or
Yep.
is there actual real hunger? So that's another point that I don't talk very much about, but it's certainly a good idea, and that is to don't think about food. Use that as one of those items that you're going to make that list of what kind of thoughts are wholesome and what
Mm-hmm.
thoughts are not wholesome. And thinking about food is not wholesome. Why? Because
Yep.
if you think about it, you'll want it. And now you
Yep.
want something you don't have. And you've
Yeah.
got to go get it. So it's better not to think about food. That when thoughts of food come in, just push them push them out.
Kick them out. Yeah.
And that way, by pushing out the thoughts about food, we'll learn to control our hunger much better. That in fact, many times people are hungry because they're thinking about food, but they're thinking about food because they've already programmed themselves that this is the
Yep.
time to eat.
Yeah, that's why when you're consumed with something, you'll forget to eat sometimes because you're not thinking about it.
Precisely, you just proved my point.
Yeah.
If we don't think about food, which means we're getting absorbed and really into some project or something, and as long as we stay absorbed in that project, we can leave all kinds of things. We don't get tired, we don't get sleepy, we don't get hungry, we don't get unhappy or angry. We don't want anything, we're just doing our thing.
Yep.
Computer programmers get like that.
Yeah.
But sometimes musicians get that way. Just sawing that pony, playing
Yeah.
the And so, right, we can keep our mind focused through training. Well, with Anapanasati, we've got a whole new world. It's a big, bright world. It's not like just music and just sawing the pony, or just, that's an old joke, by the way, from my pen. So, with Anapanasati, we've got. Remember the analogy that I talked about with keeping the monkey mind into just one tree?
Yeah.
Okay, now we have that one tree, the wholesome part of the forest,
Yep.
that we're going to stay in. And by staying in that, the tree of hunger is over there. Don't jump into the hunger tree by thinking
Yep.
about food. Don't jump into the tree over there of bad feelings because of an argument or whatever. So this is a way that we begin to keep the mind, let us say, on target or sustained, that we can apply it and sustain it in the sense that we can keep it into a world that's worth watching. So now that means that over time that your blood sugar levels will begin to get irregular because
Yep.
you're paying more attention to when you eat based upon what's real hunger versus what's imagined hunger. Now we have yet a new thing to play with, and that is the states of mind that we go through and the conditions of mind based upon not just the oxygen that we have, but also the blood sugar that's based upon what we've
Right.
been eating.
Yep.
Because that's what you were expressing is that, hey, I woke up and my blood sugar was different than I'm normally experienced, normally used to.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, it feels really weird, I think. It's not something I'm used to.
Right. Okay. Well, basically, part of the practice then of Anapanasati, or basically the whole of the Dhamma, is going on a grand adventure
Haha.
that he uses in the sense of investigation. That these are things that need to be investigated. Part of the grand adventure is to watch the states of mind that we have with various levels of blood sugar and various levels of oxygen.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, just the way that race car mechanics fine tune the engines of the race cars.
Yep.
So when you're fine tuning it like that, you've got a different intention than regular street, where the little old lady is going to keep the thing going. Okay,
Yep.
with race cars and motorcycles, why do motorcyclists go gun, 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 gun like that? Why did, and everybody does it, or at least that seems to be the habit. The answer is because those motorcycles are so fine tuned that you can't let them drop below a certain RPM level, because if they're down below about 4 or 500 RPM, they won't idle anymore. They'll stop running because you've got
Ah,
the wrong mixture for that RPM. That you've got a mixture in there for at the top end where you're running at 7 or 8 or 9,000 RPM. Back in the '60s, we didn't have
okay.
9, but we had them at 7. But anyway, yeah, motorcycle maintenance. Zen and the art of motorcycle
I've
maintenance.
heard
I've
of that
been
book.
all through that, in the sense of, yeah, we got to fine tune that engine to get it in top performance, and we need to work with our own mind that way also. So now that we've added one ingredient, which is the oxygen, and getting that going, we also can start to pedal and play and understand things better with our blood sugar, based upon when's the last time that we were eating and what did we eat.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, are you using all protein? So that should have a different thing than if you're having all donuts. So you have you have a dozen donuts for lunch, and then the next day you have a health protein shake or something like that. And watch the difference.
Yeah.
Notice the difference in the way that the blood chemistry and the mind operates. This is all part of that grand investigation, or the grand adventure of life. Is what is it like? And all of it has the quality of developing the skills. The more that we are in tune with the states of mind that we're in. In fact, this is actually in the sutta, in the Satipatthana Sutta, to
Mm-hmm.
be to start watching the mind, to see, is it bright, is it dull, is it
Mm-hmm.
sharp, is it focused, is it tingly alive? All of these various states that the mind can have, that has to do with this oxygen fuel ratio mix. This is
Mm-hmm.
actually discussed right there in the sutras.
Yeah, that's quite incredible.
And so um, we can put that together and really begin to understand the nature of the mind and how things operate. And so you can then make wiser choices. You can then decide that, because that's what I did long ago. The decision that I made is, I'm going to, uh, um, you know, let hunger be the guide. But from time to time, Tam will ask me, "Are you hungry? Are you hungry?" And I'll feel sorry for her if I then say, "Yes, I'm hungry now."
Uh-huh.
So uh, generally, uh, we begin to learn to manage the hunger, so that
Mm-hmm.
not a, it's not an issue anymore, in the sense that we need food. No, we don't need food. But we
I
have
need to
been
keep telling
trained
myself
to
that.
eat 3 times a day. And so
Yep.
if we miss a meal, we'll think about missing the meal, and then we'll feel bad. You don't have to feel bad because you miss a meal. You missed a
Yeah, I
meal
know.
because of some clock. You didn't miss a meal. You just didn't you just didn't go to the scheduled meal.
Yeah. Come to think of it, I'm not sure I even know what real hunger feels like.
Nor do you really know whether it's that terrible or not then.
Yeah, that's true. Haha.
Okay? Now, going way off base, it sounds like. Um, Imagine that, because of the normal greed of the normal human being and the normal mind, that food becomes a very important item within a prison. In a prison set,
Yes.
that food is like the only thing that anybody gets in the daytime. And
You're breaking up quite a lot.
students in food talking about.
Hey, Damarato, you are breaking up.
Okay. All right. I've just closed out a program. I think it should die in a moment.
All right.
In
You were
fact,
saying,
it's raining really hard.
I can see it, but I can't hear it too much.
Okay. How is it breaking up now?
No, no, not at all. You were talking about food
Oh,
in prison.
yeah, so we were just starting to talk about food in prison, where um, one of the points, for instance, of dominance is when the new guy comes in and it's lunchtime, and one of the big dudes in the corner is going to come over to his to that table and grab food off of his plate,
Hmm.
okay, and things like that. A wise old man, if a wise old man went to prison, what he would do is he would use the food as a tool to become friends with the meanest, toughest guys in the prison by
Hmm.
actually offering them, here, you can have a whole tray,
Yeah.
right? Because he's wise enough to know that the hunger that he has in this meal is nothing compared to what's going to be happening later. And it's good to
Yep.
have some friends in there. And so we begin to use that as a commodity. Okay. But that means that we have to be able to know that we can manage and live
Yep.
without the food, and yet everyone else in the prison is just that's the number one item of existence.
Yep.
That in fact, uh, one of the things that I have heard, and it just sounds so crazy, uh, there is and has been in fact in Asia for many many years, noodle packages. Some of them are actually brought in a paper cup, and others are just in a plastic wrap. But
Yep.
those noodles have become quite common in the West, and now I understand that this is in some prisons the commodity.
Oh, really?
Right, the existence of wealth is how many of these packets of noodles do you have stacked up?
No way.
And I think maybe because of it's easy to get food items like that into the prison, but
Yep.
food becomes actually the currency.
Mm.
And all of that has to do with built upon the greed for the food, or the desire to avoid hunger that they don't even know is mental anyway.
Yeah.
And so when you think about it, you can say, I could easily give this to the dogs, or I could easily give this to, and so we begin to look at what's going on with each plateful, with each plate, well, not just each plate full, but each bite that comes out of the plate. You start to look at that. Is this enough? Have I eaten enough
Hmm.
already? Uh, Many of us, and this was true for me in spades, that as children we're told to eat everything on our plate, that the parent defines how much we're supposed to eat.
Yep.
And we're not supposed to leave leftovers.
Yep.
I remember my mom even told me at one time, "What do you think about the starving kids of India?" But I pulled it back on her. I handed her my plate and I said, "Here, mail this one." She didn't pull that Indian trick about how starving Indians. But anyway, um, that's the way that we train our kids, and so we often overeat.
Yep.
In some traditions, though, it's exactly the opposite of that, and that is that if you clean your plate, especially if you're an adult guest in a home, if you clean your plate, that will obligate the lady of the house to go put more food on your plate. That you have to, in some cultures, leave something on the plate to signify that you're finished eating,
To show that you've had enough.
to show that you've had enough.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because if you eat everything on your plate, you're going to get more. So it depends upon the culture. But these are two different cultural positions that we can look to. The culture that we were raised in was eat your grub, kid.
Yep.
They would even schedule it to where if you don't eat this, you can't have that.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter, whether the kid likes the food or doesn't like the food. He has to eat what he's told
You
to
have to
eat in
eat
order
it.
to
Yeah.
get what he does want. Right. So this is one of the things that we do with our children, thinking that we're giving them good advice, like, oh, don't you enjoy these green peas that I made you eat? Won't you be eating green peas the rest of your life because I'm standing here making you eat these green peas? No, in fact, in that kind of thing, the aversion for the peas, in fact, may continue along. But if the parents made no big deal because the kid didn't eat green peas, next year he might eat them.
Yeah. That's so
And
true.
so, and so we make these rules about things and how we're supposed to be eating, and that without a deep investigation, we carry all of that stuff right into our adult lives, right through life.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're not investigating what's actually going on. You're just
Mhm.
kind of going along.
Going along and keeping the aversion. So you can be sitting down at some fancy dinner at a fancy hotel where it's a set meal, and there those green peas are on your plate, and you don't eat them, and they may be the best green peas in town because the chef. But no, we're not going to eat them, or if we do, we're reminded of what we thought about them when we were a kid.
Yep.
And
Exactly.
so instead of eating the peas that are on this plate in this moment with the textures and flavors that they have right now, we actually are sitting here eating the peas in our mind instead. The old.
Yeah. That's a good way of putting it.
So this the investigation. Now that you're mentioning this, that you're beginning to see. Wait a minute, I didn't eat last night, and because I wasn't hungry, and I said, "Wow, you've got so much material there to work with."
Yeah.
This
Yeah,
is all
because it does
part of
feel
the.
really different.
Pardon?
Because it does feel really different. So there's a lot going on to pay attention to and notice.
Hmm. A lot going on with food, and a lot going on with thoughts about food. And if you don't think about food,
Yeah.
then you don't get hungry generally. And if you do get hungry, what does it look like? What does it feel like? Why is it that I want to get rid of this? Now, there's
Why is it I
something else.
want to get rid of this? That's
Yeah,
interesting.
because there's one thing that's going further with that, and that is that uh, there's a certain kind of metabolism or homeostasis that a body gets into when we're an adult, and that can be uh, the body can be very thin, it can be average, or it can be overweight. And
Hmm.
generally, the overweight that we have comes from the bad diet and the bad decisions that we have been making all along. And so,
Hmm.
going on a diet winds up being a ferocious endeavor for many people. That's
Yeah.
why it tends to be a failure. But there are some things that can be used as hooks for that. And one of them has to do with the hunger. To
Hmm.
go ahead and allow yourself to get hungry, because part of what's going on with the feelings and sensations of hunger is the mechanism has now gone into reverse. It's like the locomotive is backing up, or that the process of storing is now gathering.
Hmm.
And so when we're in this kind of state, if we're watching what's going on, we can say, "Darn it! that hunger is actually beneficial. I'm going to be able to lose weight because I've got that sensation of hunger.
Yeah,
My, what
that's
a good
interesting.
boy am I. Right, I can handle that hunger. That hunger is nothing. That hunger
Yeah.
doesn't matter anymore. That in fact it's no longer a feeling to be avoided. In some cases, it's a feeling that we want to actually enjoy being in charge of.
Hmm.
And so this is another quality about friendship. We want to make friendships with everything, and hunger is a really good one to get friends with because, in fact, you spent your whole life avoiding hunger. You've been eating according to the clock. You've been eating actually
Yep.
more often than you needed to eat just to make sure that you weren't going to get hungry.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's also, eating for entertainment as well. Like
Hmm.
when you go out to eat at nice places and stuff like that. Or if you go out for dessert. Yeah.
I have been out to eat fewer times on this island than the number of years that I've lived here.
Whoa. Huh. No way. Wow, that's surprising. I didn't think.
Especially since this is a tourist island and it's rich with restaurants and hotels.
Yeah, I bet. Huh. So I
But generally,
think,
when I've gone out, is because I've been talked into it. It's an event
okay,
or something that I got to go do or whatnot like that.
some event. The hunger thing, it's like the wanting to get rid of it. That's like with all sensual desire, that we only, we desire things and we think that will make us happy, but the thing is, the getting the thing we desire is only done to get rid of that desire. So the desire is actually bad.
Bingo! Bingo! Exactly. If we desire something, that desire is in fact a form of suffering. It's an unsatisfaction. And we think that we can bring ourselves back to a state of homeostasis or back to the state of satisfaction by getting the object of our desire.
Yeah,
Guess what? No, it doesn't work that way.
it's just to get,
You just find some new object of that desire.
yeah, you do, don't you?
Most people do when they do it asleep.
So then you just want to do the same thing with the desire, just see what it's like if you just let it be there.
Mhm. Or investigate it. Not just
Investigate
let
it,
it be
yeah.
there, but investigate. And part of the investigation of it means that we're dealing with it completely differently than by just letting it be there. Being there, just letting it be there, or putting up with it, is in fact the loser's mentality, the
Yeah, of
wrong
course.
attitude, the wrong
Yeah.
view, or the wrong loser's mentality. The investigator, think about it like this: in the police force, the investigator, he's pretty high dude. He's not the street walking kind of policeman. He's he's the inspector. He's the
That's true.
investigator. He's the detective. He's the one who they bring in to really get down to what's going on. So he's the champion. So when we're in investigative mode, that's a different attitude than just putting up with.
Hmm.
And so if you get yourself into a state of hunger, you can be in 1 minute, I'm the champion of this, I'm losing weight, And then just a second later, we can say, oh, wow, I got to go get something to eat. I feel bad. And then we wake up again and say, no, I don't have to get something to eat. I like this state right now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Uh-huh.
yeah, it's very interesting.
And so when people fail at a diet, they've always failed at a diet with something like, but I'm so hungry. Well,
Yeah.
maybe, but even if the intention is to get rid of the hunger, let's do that wisely also. Let's not do whatever we've been doing to get rid of the hunger,
Ah,
but let's do
yeah.
something very wise about getting rid of the hunger. An example of that is drink a half a gallon of water.
That'll do it.
That'll do it. That's one of the things. Or maybe a protein shake
Yeah.
or bulk. These are
Hmm.
various things like an apple. But anything that's hard work,
Yeah.
anything that's hard work to do. So an example of that would be like crabs.
Oh, yeah. That's
Because
hard
it
work.
takes a lot of effort and pulling the things apart or chewing on it and chewing and chewing and chewing. That will put our minds focused on that rather than focusing on the stomach or the taste, because the taste says I
Hmm.
want more, I want more, I want more. And so
Yep.
these are things that we can do in that regard, about um, being able to control what's really going on, because
Hmm.
we've already learned how to control the breathing. Now we can learn to control some of these bodily sensations, and hunger is one that can be dealt with.
Yeah.
You
It
make a
can.
friend
Yeah.
out of it. So go ahead and let yourself get really hungry naturally. And every time that you get hungry, you can say, I'm not hungry. I'm not going to think about food. I want to go do something else. Let me sit here and be satisfied. And then when the hunger gets so big that you have to pay attention to it, now investigate. Look at it.
That is interesting. Haha. Yeah. I want to say I'm gonna try that, but I don't know if I will.
Well, you'll have to now that I've mentioned it.
That's true. Now I have to try it.
Hmm. There'll come a moment when you'll say, wait a minute, I'm not going to eat that. I'm going to investigate the hunger instead.
Yeah. All
Do I
right.
really need
Let's
that?
let's try it.
All right. Well, this is a really good topic. Thanks for bringing this up.
Thanks for the talk.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll see you next time.
Yep. See you next time. See you, Dhamma.
Okay. Bye bye.